Honourable members, I report that the government response to the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee report, Voluntary Assisted Dying in the Northern Territory final report, was deemed tabled on the 16th of March 2026 pursuant to Standing Order 201. Are there any other papers? There are no other papers. Honourable members, I have received correspondence from the member for Arnhem as follows. I propose for discussion this day the following definite matter of public importance: working together to better prepare for natural disasters. The letter is signed by the member for Arnhem. Is discussion supported? Yes, discussion is supported. I call the member for Arnhem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to present this matter of public importance, and I think the whole chamber would agree, very topical at this point, and seeing what efforts we can further be constructive with in making sure that even when there are uncertain times and unprecedented times, that there are plans, that those plans are articulated well, and that they are promoted and articulated across many different types of media and communication platforms, Madam Speaker. As we all know, the Territory is experiencing our worst flooding events in decades. Thousands of Territorians have been impacted and continue to be impacted that have completely the flooding has completely inundated communities, pastoral properties, campgrounds, tourist accommodation, businesses and people's homes and livelihoods, Madam Speaker. Hundreds of millimetres of rain have fallen over the past few weeks right across the Northern Territory, from the Central Australian region, where your home is, Madam Speaker, to the Barkly region, to the Big Rivers region and my home and parts of my electorate, as well as, of course, up here in the top end. In Katherine, Madam Speaker, the river peaked at 19.2 metres on the 7th of March, the highest level since 1998. The Daly River at Niu is experiencing record flooding with water well above the major flood threshold, and it is expected to stay that way for the rest of the week, Madam Speaker. Niu, along with the people of Palumpa, had to be airlifted out of their community as the floodwaters took hold of their communities. 400 people in Jilkming in my electorate of Arnhem, Madam Speaker, were either self-evacuated or 60 assisted to Mataranka, the closest township. And of those 60, those people who were assisted were transported by boat across the water as it had already started to rise along the riverbed and the bridge, Madam Speaker. The people of Jilkmingen have been housed at 2 shelters, not evacuation centres, 2 shelters with the Mataranka Town Hall and the Mataranka School. Many more communities and properties have been affected, Madam Speaker. As we know, we're hearing more and more heartbreaking stories of personal loss and the loss of people's livelihoods. We have seen some of the most incredible rescue operations from police, emergency service workers and others that have put their life on the line to save Territorians and visitors alike. And sadly, we know many people have lost pets as well as livestock in these floods. Katherine and the Big Rivers region residents are currently taking stock of the damage and in some parts starting the clean-up, with support today officially starting and activated by the Australian Defence Force, which will be long and difficult, and we welcome the work with and the support of the Australian Defence Force, Madam Speaker, something that our Labor opposition was calling from for the very start of last week. So a week later we've seen that come to fruition, and we thank those men and women in uniform for their assistance across the Northern Territory with some of those recovery efforts. And particularly a big shout out to my electorate of Arnhem, the people of Tyndall, RAF Base, Madam Speaker. I know that they were keen. Many were already volunteering last week. They weren't able to do so in uniform. They had to be out in their civvies and volunteering because they love the community and they respect the community and they want to be part of that support and recovery. They were part of some of the prevention work that was happening last week as volunteers, but now they can officially do that. And there's something about men and women in uniform, Madam Speaker, that give that little bit of sense that we're not alone and that we do have people who are trained to have those responses. And thankfully, Tyndall RAF Base is now able to participate in the support of the region. Hoping it'll extend past just Katherine, that it will indeed involve other parts of the flood-affected communities right across Big Rivers, Madam Speaker. Residents from communities like Palumpa and Daly are likely to be out of their homes for many weeks and perhaps even months to come. Gilpingan residents remain stuck in Mataranka. We know that there's been some clearing of water on the Roper Highway, and I thank Minister Yan for an update yesterday about Salt Creek Bridge being cleared and assessed, and it is structurally sound to be able to travel on. And unfortunately, Donkey Flat, which is a flooded part of the Roper Highway, that still remains uncertain. So we're still waiting for that to go down, Madam Speaker, before the people of Gilpingan will have an opportunity, if so, to return home safely. But there's been a phenomenal amount of work with Infrastructure, Power and Water Corporation, assessing the community of Gilpingan over the last few days, including over the weekend, being helicoptered in many times to be able to assess homes. And I think even Roper Gulf Regional Council were doing some of the animal welfare checks and making sure any animals that were unfortunately left behind, that they are fed and looked after in this time of uncertainty. Madam Speaker, I am a bit alarmed though, however, in a question that was asked today, pardon me, in question time to the Chief Minister, and also to part answered by the Minister for Children and Family around the flood evacuation efforts of Gilpingan, and I think there's probably a bit of misconception. I have double-checked with constituents who I visited on Sunday that the tents that were provided were not provided by the government, they were not provided by the council, they were bought by community members, because the town hall stands about, I think it's about 90 people standing, so not enough space for 400 community members. The school, there's 2 classrooms in use where people have makeshift bedding on 2 classroom floors. There are tents that have been bought by Gilpingan community members to house themselves and to shelter themselves on the basketball court at the Mataranka School, and also down at the Roper Golf Sport Rec Shed, the place where they have the rodeo and some of the big events there. People have been using their own tents and sheltering in some of the undercover areas there, and sleeping in some of the kitchen area at the Sport and Rec area. So all across the community of Mataranka, including Mulgan Town Camp and the Ranger Base, the Mangarayo Ranger Base, there are people spread out from Gilpingan, and unfortunately, because of where people have moved, they may or may not be able to access the extra support of flood relief, which kicked in quite late, Madam Speaker, in terms of self-sufficiency and being able to cater for and support that amount of people in a short amount of time. And I thank the people who stepped up in a short amount of time, particularly the Mataranka school principal, whose part of her business and her home was flooded in that property. She wasn't able to get home to check on it because she was doing 12-hour shifts at the Mataranka shelter based at the school. Big shout out to the Sullivans at Cave Creek Station, who sent in some of their family members to have a look at the animals that were left, and were able to rescue some of the animals from Des and Telka's property, which are part of their business as well, and safely return some beautiful animals like pythons, Madam Speaker. So not necessarily a job that I would put my hand up for, but thankfully there are good people in the community that are brave and will do that sort of work too, because they love their community and they love their neighbours and they love the place that we get to call home. Madam Speaker, the residents of Darwin River are still working through their shock at the speed and severity of the flooding that impacted their community just days ago, and some people have lost their homes in some very heartbreaking stories. The assistance, support and care shown by police, our emergency service workers and our support staff, the many volunteers and community members that have put their hand up, Madam Speaker, to help out fellow Territorians has been nothing short of extraordinary. It was incredibly welcome news, as I said, Madam Speaker, that the Australian Defence Force will support the flood recovery efforts after the Chief Minister finally requested the assistance to do so in our regions. It will be many months, Madam Speaker, we anticipate, before some communities will be well and truly back on their feet. And we now have a potential cyclone, possibly a tropical low, bearing down on the Territory and some of our communities out to East Arnhem, from the Mulga electorate and from my electorate and the top of the Barkly electorate, who will be very nervous and struggling with some of those impacts of any type of rain depression or tropical low across the Gulf, and possible flooding impacts. Communities that are already rained in for many months of the year, Madam Speaker, bracing themselves and getting quite nervous. I'm already fielding calls now from the East Arnhem pocket of my electorate, particularly Numbulwar. Madam Speaker, today the MPI was brought on to focus on flood inquiry and learning lessons. And we have welcomed, our Labor team has welcomed the Chief Minister's statement that there will be a review in some time at the appropriate time about the events and what's unfolded and the learnings and the lessons that can be brought forward into the future, perhaps even the very, very near future. And Madam Speaker, this is important because we do need to learn the lessons of the most recent flooding events across the territory, from the centre to the top end, to ensure that we can be better prepared for next time. Unfortunately, when that time will be, Mother Nature will be the only one to tell us that. Any review or inquiry, Madam Speaker, we believe should be done independently, at arm's length from government, and so that all aspects of the response can be fully and objectively considered. This is not about finding fault with our incredible frontline officers and those people who have worked day in and day out, nighttime and daytime, around the clock to support fellow communities across their regions. They deserve our absolute gratitude and respect for all that they have done so far and what they continue to do today and what they will do into the next few weeks. Madam Speaker, this is about ensuring that the systems, processes and procedures that are in place are as good and as solid and as well prepared and thought out and planned as possibly that they can be. Any inquiry should also allow the voices of those impacted by these floods to be heard directly. They deserve to be able to tell their stories and have their feedback recorded and taken into account if we are to truly learn from this event, Madam Speaker. Something across the territory we have all been grappling with, and indeed across the country, is the reality of climate change and the increasing severity of regularity of disasters in Australia for many years now. In 2024 alone, Madam Speaker, there are at least 30 disasters across Australia causing severe hardship and disruption to our fellow Australian communities. Every single one of these events caused trauma and distress, long-term health problems, financial distress, business impacts and challenges with employment and secure, safe housing. We are seeing that play out right now, Madam Speaker, before our very eyes across the Northern Territory and so many Territorians affected. There's been significant work done across the nation to address the growing threat of climate-induced natural disasters and the threat that they pose to the wellbeing and security of communities across the country. The Northern Territory has been part of this work, Madam Speaker, but it is critical that we continue to do all that we can in terms of better preparation when it comes to the inevitability of natural disasters in order to mitigate any risk that may pose. We acknowledge the Chief Minister's commitment today to provide $100 million towards recovery efforts. Critical that this funding is spent well and on projects that deliver better, more weather-resilient infrastructure for our communities and fellow Territorians and businesses. While $100 million, Madam Speaker, will go some way to support improved infrastructure, there will be much more required to ensure communities are made more resilient in the face of natural disasters. And we will be watching very closely, Madam Speaker, and asking the questions that community members and our electorates and our businesses have been asking us to ask when it comes to the extra support and the investment in prevention, not just responsive. It is critical, Madam Speaker, that we see that there's greater focus in that preventative investment so we can see that across the territory preparedness when it comes to extreme natural disasters. And we know this will be a reality, Madam Speaker. And the best way that we can work together to support fellow Territorians is to make sure that we are all doing our work up front to better safeguard communities before they are impacted in the first place by some of these natural disasters. And Madam Speaker, I have quite a lot of communities and homelands that have been affected recently, so I've been checking in with some of the stories, particularly from feeding into questions and concerns through the incident controllers of my area and the Arnhem electorate. Warrenbin Homeland, which is on the road to Leland Edith Falls, were cut off completely. They don't have a shop. There's about 12 houses in that little homeland. They were luckily just over a kind of a bit of a hill, so the houses didn't get inundated with water, but they were isolated. There was no road access. They're about half an hour north of Katherine, and the only places they can go to get food is the kiosk at Edith Falls, which was cut off because the falls flooded, as well as Katherine, which the road, I think the member for Katherine had good fishing and turtles too. the member for Katherine had a really phenomenal video that someone had obviously sent around the flooding of those two bridges. So there's a low bridge and a high bridge, and both of them completely under. I was quite shocked to see how much the vegetation had really turned on its side when I was returning home to Katherine, and so it was quite visually impacting, let alone thinking about all the water that had gone through that area. Manuel community, also named Eva Valley on the Central Arnhem Road. Whilst the community itself didn't flood, it was isolated. The road, the 34 kilometres of road onto the Central Arnhem Road, is quite hairy at the best of times in a wet season, let alone all the extra water that the flooding has seen. Food security was a huge issue for Manuel because they do not have a shop as well. They're the last community for me to try and continue the work in advocating for a shop. A few times we've gotten close, but not quite landed there. I checked in with some people from Manuel today. They also had an incident in the community, and unfortunately, because of all the flooding, this horrible perfect storm of not being able to get the extra support that they needed until 2 days later, police support and medical support for Manuel. So keeping in touch with people who are unfortunately sometimes very used to isolation, but when things go tough, when things are a big concern and the times are tough, when people reach out, you know that it must be really serious in terms of community safety and well-being. Woogala, or Beswick is the other name many people referred to, was one of the first places, Madam Speaker, to be anticipated to be flooded. So they were quite organised in terms of 3-4 floods in the last 10 years that I've been a local member, Madam Speaker. So the bottom sub, people heard me talk about this last week, but the bottom sub was people were moved to the top sub, but the bottom sub provides quite a few services: the clinic, the Sunrise Clinic, the Roper Gulf Regional Council office, the beautiful Gilpin Arts Art Centre, the aged care, which operated by the council, as well as the creche. So a lot of the community services do sit and are situated. Oh, and also the Narungalang Rise CDP program, their head office is down in the bottom sub as well as quite a few homes. So people were evacuated up to the top sub. Thankfully, Madam Speaker, the investment in remote housing has made a huge difference for Woogala community. So a lot of people were able to stay with other family members. There are about 45 people that access the evacuation centre that was set up at the school. It was called a centre, not a shelter. And received the extra support. And a big shout out to Stephen Hill, the principal there, and all the staff and the community service providers who ran that centre at the school. They sort of had numbers go down to about 20 or so, but the clinic was operating from the school and people still able to get their medications. They were able just to get out in time to move. But I think a lot of extra training for service providers and community members is needed to be able to ensure that there's local talent and local knowledge on the ground, as well as those extra resources that can be brought in, whether it's driven in, choppered in, or flown in when there's times of emergency. Mataranka, two particular businesses I want to give a shout out and thanks in amongst all of the uncertainty, and that's the Little Roper Stock Camp, Des Barrett and Telka, who's the principal at Mataranka School, for their time on Sunday, as well as Ben Moore and his team at the Mataranka Homestead, who were able to take me across and see some of the water levels that they experienced. There's a great photo of Ben with his hand up on the top bar at Mataranka Homestead, if anyone's been there. They've done a phenomenal amount of cleaning. Like, I'm just talking phenomenal, like been washing all of the mud, I think 4 high pressure cleaners. So just today we've emphasised a question to a couple of the ministers about, is there any business support for particularly tourism or small businesses that will be able to assist, because estimated costs for those cleanups are in the thousands, Madam Speaker. So it'd be great to hear when the time's right, of course, if there is any of that type of tourism or small business grants that can be accessed. But huge shout out to Ben and to Des for their time. They were actually in really good spirits, Madam Speaker, which gave me a bit of comfort, but I know that's been a lot of work and Ben's team at the homestead, a couple of backpackers as well, Madam Speaker, who probably never been through a flood, coming from particularly from some European countries. So yeah, quite phenomenal. And they did make the front page of the NT News a couple of days ago last week. So great cracker photo of Ben and a couple of the team getting out, you know, a few cartons of beer, saving out some of the stocks, Madam Speaker, but it's a pretty fantastic photo if anyone gets to see it. Food security, of course, was a big issue in this. And then Jilkmingen, Madam Speaker, I'll continue to advocate for the people of Jilkmingen. We're now seeing people who are stranded not being able to get home to places like Minyeri, that long-term flooding, roads infrastructure. That's why it's so important to invest in our roads. And Nooka and Yurrunga communities, and of course Numbwa, which may possibly be affected by the weather that is anticipated. They're coming across the Gulf. So, yeah, the questions will continue to be asked. It is in good faith. It is on behalf of people, but you know the process of being able to ensure that people are properly supported. I went and visited the evacuation centre at Foskey's Pavilion yesterday, and the complete difference to an evacuation centre and the resources to what the people in Mataranka and Jilkmingen had, you know, completely opposite experience. But if there's a way to improve that work, Madam Speaker, I'll be here as local member to advocate for it. Thank you.
Member for Katherine, are you okay to stand, or you can sit if you want?
Madam Speaker, I'll just pull that
fine.
down. Madam Speaker, I rise to speak on this matter of public importance, and I thank the opposition leader for bringing it at such an opportune time where we can talk about, you know, the flooding and potentially what we can do to make it better in the future. And as someone, you know, I'm certainly honoured to be announced, you know, this morning leading the 100 million flood recovery fund along with Ken Davies, PSM, who's been appointed the Director General overseeing the flood recovery. And I'm sure, Madam Speaker, my first-hand experience will be insightful into that work that we will do. Mr Ken Davies is a highly respected public servant. He's worked for both sides of government. He certainly has a lot of experience. And so that will be great to do that work with him. The Flood Recovery Fund from the NT Whanokea RSLP government will be prioritised in rebuilding roads like those out in the communities of Murray Downs, for example, bridges like the Salt Creek Bridge on the way to Jilkmingen, Darwin River Dam pumps, sewer breakdown that we had in Katherine. If we didn't have enough going on, Madam Speaker, we had broken sewer mains as well that we were dealing with. And then the many roads that we have across the territory that certainly need a lot of work at the moment. So, you know, that work will happen. Ken will be out reviewing all that right across the territory. This is not just about Katherine, this is about right across the territory. We've had unprecedented weather events over the last, well, probably this wet season actually. You know, we all love a good wet season, but this one's just, I'm done, it can go now. The extent of flooding across the territory, as I said, is unprecedented, and a considerable amount of money will be needed to fix things. But the point of the Flood Recovery Fund is to prioritise the infrastructure need and funding. It's about building back better where we can. It's no good just building back the same as we had it before, Madam Speaker. We must do better and build those roads up better and just make our infrastructure better. For example, the flood levy in Katherine was built for a 1 in 20 year flood, but, you know, it was higher this time than what it was in 2006. So, you know, could potentially that go a little higher, because it certainly did do a great job when it was, until it went over the top. Madam Speaker, for 36 years of living in Katherine, we have dealt with our fair share of flooding. Not only Katherine this year, but Alice Springs has seen flooding, and I can't remember the last time the Todd River has flowed so often, and I'm sure, Madam Speaker, you would know all about that in such a short time. Across the Barkly, we've seen in Murray Downs, we've seen Lake Nash, also the Daly River community of Niu that has been displaced twice in the last month, and I can't imagine how those people are feeling. And I did reach out to Miriam Rose and just touch base with her to see how she was faring. We've seen in recent years communities of Pigeonhole severely flooded and rebuilt in the same place. But what we need to look at is if it is viable to rebuild these communities back in those exact same places. And I do note there were conversations with elders at the time when they did flood, and potentially to move them to higher ground. But that also, brings in concerns of pastoralists and land councils. So there's a lot of conversations that need to be had there. It didn't seem that long ago, Madam Speaker, that Timber Creek saw their share of flash flooding as well, where the hotel had been underwater, town camps went under, the Vic Highway was cut off. We saw locals like Rainey and Potter from Farcom Contracting of Timber Creek flew to Kununurra to get supplies for their town and other members of the community that had been isolated and running short of food. At the same time, we saw the Vic River Roadhouse, owned by Milton and Christina Jones, have water up to the bar and the driveway scoured out so badly on the way in that you'd just about lose a small car in it. In many years before, we saw the Victoria River Bridge raised considerably higher from the original, and yet still that bridge went under. So many areas across the Territory have been flooded over my years here, and it is these events that see the Territory spirit shine through. Communities and towns rally together to help each other out. This brings strength to our towns, builds resilience, and makes us stronger together. This is what we saw recently in Katherine. Sandbags were put out across town in every business doorway in the main street by people like Ben Hockey and his team of volunteers. Ben has a garden maintenance business and family, but did not think twice about helping others. Residents in Katherine joined Ben's team, like Stefan and Lauren, that had only been in town for 2 weeks. Stefan has 3 jobs, Madam Speaker, at Intersport, Coffee Club, and also the Bodie Bus, and I spoke to him. And it's just incredible that someone who'd literally been in town 3 weeks, had 2 jobs, and then was still out there helping do the sandbagging of business as well. But also, along the way, sending Nikki from the Coffee Club photos to let her know that her business was safe. Those sandbags were filled out at the NTES yards. Also a big shout out and thanks to Andrew from Allied Pickfords and Cassie Russell Pell. They also did the sandbagging, putting those sandbags on the back of Andrew's truck and delivering them around town. And I want to thank them also for sandbagging my office as well as the Bendigo Bank next to me as well. When they finished sandbagging the main street, Madam Speaker, they went door to door through the streets of town, and anyone that wanted sandbags, they handed out to them and helped them sandbag their residents. It's quite remarkable, the community spirit and people coming together in times like this. In Katherine, our town worked together to keep the community informed about the river heights or the goings-on in town due to flooding, whether it was who was doing the sandbagging, shouting out for volunteers, River Heights, where the water was up to around town. It was Trent DeWitt from Rod and Rifle and his brother Brendan from Territory Refrigeration and Air Conditioning that rode their deadly treadlies around town, giving updates almost hourly, it felt like, throughout the day and into the night for residents to keep up to date. They slept at the business, kept guard, not only of their business, but for flooding, but gave, I'm sure one night Trent went out and did a midnight update, which I only saw the next day. But all of us in Katherine were grateful for those updates, and I know for some people, it was the highlight of the flood when things seemed grim. As I was incapacitated due to a very badly timed operation, Trent was sending me footage as well and keeping me up to date of different things that were going on. In Katherine, the flood mitigation was put in to cope with, as I said, a 1 in 20 year flood. What the gods didn't tell us was that this weather event was higher than 2006. In review, this could be something that can be looked at to be raised higher. The flood levy wall potentially could go higher, because right up until that point, Madam Speaker, that flood mitigation you could see was doing great work. And when some of those aluminium borders came out, when Trent actually sent me a video and put them back in, because the water had gone over and they'd floated out, when he put them back in, you could see the water diverting. And by that flood mitigation, it really did save the town, the main street area, from the worst flooding that, we could have had a lot worse. At my house alone, I said it was higher than 2006. At my house alone, we had probably a foot higher in the front house, and at the back, we probably had about 2 more feet higher than 2006. We certainly worked all day Friday. Well, I didn't. My husband and family did, to move his many motorbikes, cars, everything up onto the veranda. Looked like some kind of camp up there. It still does. But we worked tirelessly, or they worked tirelessly, on getting everything up, and never thinking that you're going to see that much water through your house. On the Saturday morning when I woke up, I actually woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wheeled myself down to the front gate to have a look across the other side to see the water coming in. Went back to bed for a while, and I got my son up in the morning to take me for a drive around town. And I couldn't believe, in just that hour and a half from when we got back, he was driving through the water that was halfway up his tyres through our yard. It was quite incredible, the rate the river was rising. So there was a mad dash to throw everything because the police had come and said they're closing the bridge. We had 30 minutes to get out. Everything was thrown in eskies, the dogs in the back of the ute, and we went over to my daughter's place. Many residents from Katherine were inundated, just like myself. Dave and Emma, down the road from me, had 1.75 metres through their house. They lived on their mezzanine above their shed and above Dave's business with their 2 dogs, their 2 kids, until 2 days later Hamish Croft came and saved them. Like them, Luke and Nikki Asling lived behind them. They actually were high and dry on Riverbank Drive, and then they decided they were going to move a little bit more rural and move to Fogarty Street behind me. They should have come and asked me, Madam Speaker. I said that area floods like anything, even with big rain. Poor Luke, even a couple of days ago, I went and saw him. He looked like a broken man. I certainly knew how we didn't need to exchange too many words. I knew how he felt. So even 2 days ago, they still had water in their house. He had to carry his wife out that had a very untimely operation as well. I spoke to Alan Mole from Kalano, who had evacuated the members there, moved to the shelter, and also the aged care facility that had been moved to higher ground. The resident Kalano pig didn't make it, which was a sad for that family. I think it was a Lazarus. And that pig has been out there at Kalano for as long as I've known. It's the biggest pig. And anyway, the poor thing did not survive the flood. Oh. And all those residents there have been sheltering in the shelters, either at the high school or at Casuarina Street. Fortunately for Alan, he said they have insurance there, so that's great for them. But I see that today the ADF have been in helping them clean up there as well. And Kalano is such a great community where the members have pride in their community. It always is clean and tidy. The lawns are mowed. It looks really amazing. And so, it will take a long time to get back to that. Many stories of food security came out as our town was cut off from the main town centre, where we only have one supermarket. When Rinaldi, the manager of Woolworths, could get back in there, he did a stellar job of making sure they got more diesel for the generator until the power managed to come back on, got the staff in, restocked the shelves, and surveyed the store and opened up as soon as was practical. And to be honest, every day has been a blur since then. And the Chief Minister did come down, and maybe it was last Monday, the Chief Minister came down, and we went around and saw some of these people and thanked Rinaldi. And, for people that haven't been in a flood in town before, it's daunting. It's terrifying. You don't know where the water's going to stop. On the Thursday, we were told it was just going to be minor flooding, and then you wake up Friday morning and, some people had putting their feet out of bed and they've got water in their house. That's not minor flooding. So we also saw amazing joined forces of businesses in Katherine, like Jason Scadden from Town and Country Butchers, along with Blue Hole, which is out in the industrial area. Jason didn't have any power, so all his meat got transferred out to Blue Hole, and they worked together and worked as a team and served our community with meat. We saw Alison and her son Jake from the Katherine Club cooking up a storm for volunteers where, fortunately, one of my staff came down, drove me around town for the week, helped me out immensely. A big shout out to Zach that did a lot for me over that week and certainly helped me do those deliveries to the police, to the health staff, to the NTES workers and the volunteers of that food that Alison and Jake had cooked up. We also saw our Mayor, Joanna Holden, just as a community member, get out shoulder to shoulder with residents in town, cleaning up places as well. You know, it's great to have a good council working together with government and also, you know, with our other Thomas Manning from Department of Chief Ministers in Katherine, but not only Thomas, Commander Terry Zhang, all of the heads of the government departments in Katherine. I've honestly could not be more proud of our community and how well they work together in times of an emergency. And I think for all of the those that working together and the fact that we have a very resilient community, our recovery has been that much better for it. Throughout the evacuation and rising waters, residents that could attend the shelter, whether they were at the high school under Nick Lovering and the dedicated educational staff there, but not only the educational staff at the high school, Casuarina Street with Nicole Gadders, the principal there, or as I said in McFarlane, which was the medically vulnerable residents there under Philip Russell. I don't think Philip actually went home, and there was many people that stayed and did hours and hours relentlessly along with, you know, the children and families staff. Madam Speaker, there's a guy that I met called Matt that literally had come from SA Police, been in the Territory for 2 weeks and then was sent to Katherine, and he just couldn't believe the extent of the flooding and just the operation that was actually going on. And honestly, a big shout out to him through Minister Cahill. He did a fantastic job, but as did all of those workers as well. We saw pop-up schools at Clyde Fenton and Katherine South where students could go from the shelters or around town just in a limited capacity. We saw the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, the Heritage Church, all working throughout those shelters, supporting the people in there. And, you know, those people, there was another couple that had literally were travelling from overseas and got stuck in town, and you know, it wasn't quite the holiday that they had planned, but they were making the most of the relaxation, they said. We had people like One Set Building crew and the Katherine Game Fishing Club who boated residents of Florina Road back and forth across the creek to get supplies into town. They weren't just boating across one creek, there was 2 creeks that were up, so they had to do a bit of a, you know, it was a bit of an episode to actually get to the Rockhole side of the 2 creeks. A big shout out to Chris Rowlands from Rowlands Quarries, Joshua Duncombe and Wade Hons for supplying their tinnies for this service. Now, I know how everyone loves their fishing up here, Madam Speaker, and I think everyone loves their boats as well. So to people to lend their boats in situations like this, it really is quite remarkable. Trent was out there cooking up a storm on the barbecue, and when I went out there, it was quite a party atmosphere. You wouldn't have actually known there was too much going on. And I do remember that from the 98 flood as well, Madam Speaker. You know, when you're out in those outlying areas of Katherine, most people that live out of town have at least a week's supply of groceries. If you're my father-in-law, he could live a month without going to the shop, but he did happen to go back to the shop when they opened. Not quite sure why. He probably could have fed the whole of Florina Road. But, you know, most people out there and people that have been in Katherine a long time, they certainly do stock up for the winter, for the wet season. And I know I spoke to Bess Hart, and she says in November she always makes sure she's got at least 3 weeks' food in her pantry. We saw amazing things, Madam Speaker, like St John's driving through the floodwater with Emily Griffiths and Lachlan Mickick, and they delivered a baby girl, Madam Speaker, through the flood. And that little baby girl was called Venice. Now, I know Venice is surrounded by water, so I thought it was quite a fitting name. I did last Friday go down to Mataranka and speak to Telka at the Mataranka Primary School. I spoke to David, the CEO of Roper Golf, along with Cindy and Luke Haddo that were down there, and the residents down there. Massive big shout out to Stevie, I spoke to from Julkmingen, who drives the school bus there and then works for Sunrise after hours as well. It was great. They were all very happy to know that their dogs had been checked in on, they'd been fed, and they were all interested in the, how the Salt Flat Creek looked, the Salt Creek Bridge, looked. And that day they had been out, an engineer had been out and structurally had a look at it, and it came back that it was fine. It just needed a little bit of work on the pavement. But it was great to talk to those residents out there. Yes, some of them were intense. I did not speak to any of them that were not, okay, it wasn't their home, but they were all happy, they were fed. Before the supplies came in from Children and Families, the ladies from Julkmingen were cooking up a storm for the rest of the residents. So, Madam Speaker, I'll leave my contribution there. I'll maybe finish in a German or something. But suffice to say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger here in the Territory. And our town of Katherine certainly has come out more resilient and stronger and better for it. Thank you.
Member for Gwoja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I do rise to contribute to the MPI this evening because it is a very important topic and one that we need to work together on. Madam Speaker, water is life, but when it's not properly managed or monitored, it can take life. Across the Northern Territory, we know that floods and natural disasters are not new. Our communities, especially in the bush, have lived through it time and time again. People are resilient, Madam Speaker. They know how to respond, they know how to look after each other. But recent events have shown us, Madam Speaker, we cannot rely on resilience alone. We must be better prepared. Because these events are becoming more frequent, more unpredictable and more severe. Madam Speaker, I've been a Member of Parliament for almost 10 years now, and every year I have heard that it is unprecedented rainfall or weather patterns. And when they hit us, it's often our most vulnerable and our most remote communities that feel it first and hardest. Roads are cut off, supply chains are disrupted, families are isolated, and essential services are stretched. That's why preparing for floods and natural disasters does need to be a shared responsibility. It's not just the role of government, it's not just the role of emergency services, it requires all of us working together. Governments, local councils, community organisations, industries and local people on the ground. We need better coordination, we need better communication. We need to make sure that when warnings go out, they reach everyone, including people in regional and remote locations. They need to be in language and they need to make sense locally. Madam Speaker, I want to acknowledge last night when the weather warning went out for Central Australia on Secure NT's website, it went out in Western Aranda, in Aranda, in Pitjantjatjara and Luricha. Really important to be able to communicate in the local language of the local area. We also need to invest, Madam Speaker, in the basics, but don't forget what worked in the past. Radio is still one of the most incredibly important ways to get the message out. And as we've heard, Madam Speaker, people talking about we can get text messages from Clive Palmer to join a political party, we can get text messages out to advise people that there are issues or emergency notices. We all need to do better. We need stronger roads, more reliable crossings, better drainage and infrastructure that can withstand heavy rain and flooding. Because every time a road is cut off, it's not just an inconvenience, it affects food, health services, schools and livelihoods. Madam Speaker, we're seeing that already with the Victoria Highway being cut off in sections, with the Stewart Highway being cut off in sections, and from time to time we see significant rain, the railway is cut off. This has significant impact on all of our regional towns across the Territory, Madam Speaker. We do need to look at long-term planning. better land management, better environmental understanding, and smarter decisions about where we build and how we build. And importantly, we must listen, because the people who know those conditions best are the people who live on the land. Aboriginal communities, rangers, local leaders, local residents in our urban regional centres, they all hold the knowledge that must be part of how we prepare for the future. If we're serious about building resilience, Madam Speaker, we must bring that knowledge into the centre of decision making. Preparing for natural disasters is not just about responding when things go wrong. It must be about making sure we're ready before they happen. It's about reducing the risk, protecting lives, and keeping communities connected. It's about fairness, Madam Speaker, because no Territorian should be left behind when disaster strikes, no matter how remote or how regional they are. So let this be a lesson for all of us, Madam Speaker. We prepare better when we work together. We respond better when we listen to each other. And we recover stronger when we stand together as one territory. Because at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, that's what defines us as Territorians, when we look after each other. Madam Speaker, I think it is important to certainly acknowledge and, really, I guess, thank the emergency services and the critical goods teams, Madam Speaker, who have been doing the work right across the territory. And I also do want to absolutely, while we are acknowledging emergency services, I do want to acknowledge the Chief Minister. And I just want to also acknowledge that I have worked with her behind the scenes for updates around my community and making sure that our communities are well stocked. And I think that is important because this is people we're talking about and making sure that they've got access. So I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I do acknowledge that work. We do need to get better with how we look at road reports so that people can. I know a lot of people are quite scared at the moment trying to get home to their community because they're hearing about Cyclone Narelle, as it's now been called. I think it's Narelle.
That's my mother-in-law's name.
Wow. So I think there is some work. And, we're chartering food around the territory, and that's, a pretty significant movement of goods and services to stock food, to keep stock shelved. But I think this raises a really important question. I know one that the member for Barkly will, contribute on tonight as well, because it's a very important area for us in remote communities, is I do not care who or how we pay for it, whether we need the Territory and the Commonwealth to come together, but we need to look at how we store food in regional and remote locations. So Alice Springs, Tennant Creek, Katherine, and in remote communities, so that when we do get these situations where people are being cut off, Madam Speaker, we know that they've got a stockpile of food secured, locked up, locked away, so that we don't have to put enormous pressure on charter services at one time to get goods and services out. Madam Speaker, no one ever gets anything completely right, and there will be an inquiry. I acknowledge that. I'm not saying that this government got it completely wrong. I'm not saying that when we were in government we got it completely right. We have to obviously look at this and work together. I think acknowledging as well the member for Katherine, it's incredibly hard to share your story and relive, the trauma. I've got family who are proud Katherinites who this week have really struggled and really felt unlocked emotion and trauma around reliving that. I know that there are certain smells that reignite that trauma with the floods, and I think that's important to acknowledge that whether it's Katherine, whether it's Palumpa, whether it's Daly River, whether it's residents of Kalgorinji, Dagaragu, Nitchboro, which is known as Pigeonhole, Yarralin, Timber Creek, when these events happen now or into the future, they always reignite a sense of anxiety and emotion. And we need to acknowledge that people are going to be heightened, even if there's not a direct risk in their community. When a river starts rising, the emotion starts rising and people start getting scared. So we all have a role to try and keep people calm and keep the situations de-escalated until we have access to all the information. And I want to acknowledge that we do need to look at that work around flood mitigation, and the member for Katherine has spoken about how the levees worked to a particular degree, and then it was just too much for them. I think that we do need to look at that. I think that we need to look at what does flood mitigation look like in the future and how does it work. But also I think working as a parliament with the Commonwealth around what they call betterment, Madam Speaker, which is when something is damaged in a natural disaster, how do we repair it so that it is better than it was before it was damaged, to reduce further risk. And I think that's really important. That's the work we should be putting our focus and energy to after the recovery efforts have been closed, so that we can really look at, okay, what are some of the things that we can do to ensure that next time there is a flood of this magnitude, we're not seeing this significant impacts like we are right now. That is a huge volume of work. Working with our remote communities as well. These are unprecedented times, but they are becoming more regular. So what does that look like in the bush? Making sure that we might have to look at how we are currently installing and setting up telecommunications, because floods keep washing lines away, people keep getting cut off, they can't access goods and services. We might need to look at where we can address some of these crossings so that we can try and provide a bit more all-weather access into some of these communities, because we're obviously not going to be able to bitumise every road in the Northern Territory, but we do need to look at providing major corridors across the Territory for that connectivity. You know, the Victoria Highway, Madam Speaker, is a crucial corridor for getting goods and services into the entire Territory, as is the Stuart Highway, and as is the country down in the Barkly region, the Barkly Tablelands as well. Getting people there is important. I do also want to acknowledge, and I don't often give acknowledges to those on the opposite side of me, but I do want to acknowledge the Housing Minister today has made it clear that those affected by the floods, so those whose homes have been completely inundated and flooded and they can't get back to their community, are not going to have to pay rent. But that's only for those communities that people's homes have been completely lost and destroyed. And that's going to be a significant effort, Madam Speaker, around how do we respond to this, because there are places in the Territory, Daly River, Nitchborough, which is known as Pigeonhole, which are very susceptible to flooding because of where they are built. And we need to have a conversation around what does good design look like in the future. So this may be an opportunity for the government to consider having a look at and embedding and mandating some planning laws and rules around particular height restrictions moving forward for homes to be elevated off the ground. I know that that's something that we started doing, Madam Speaker, when we were in government in areas of Julpmingan and Kalgoorlie, where we started to lift the houses so that they were elevated on stilts so they could withstand some of those flood waters. We did the same in Dargaragu. We had the homes lifted about 1.2 metres. Flood came through. One time it was okay, the second time it was 1.5. So again, I acknowledge that the weather is unpredictably unpredictable, Madam Speaker, but we can try as hard as we can to better respond because we are starting to see a change in the weather patterns, more intense rainfall, certainly larger wet seasons, and particularly in Central Australia, the rain that we have had this year, the member for Breitling and Namatjura and Barkly would probably also agree, is almost unprecedented. I don't think we've seen this since the 90s. This level of rain, Madam Speaker, and yourself, is huge. So it does raise some serious questions. Katherine and Alice Springs hospitals probably not built in the best locations when it comes to floods, because Katherine, right on the river, Alice Springs, just a skip away from the river. So as we do look at planning, how do we try and mitigate the risks to those places where people go for medical treatment? Really important, we do need to do that work. You know, again, I think the member for Katherine spoke about it, the member for Arnhem spoke about it. One thing that is true, and it shines every time we have a natural disaster, Madam Speaker, is the spirit of Territorians to help one another, to come out. We will continue to hear these stories, and we need to continue to celebrate the heroes who have been there in the time of need. The only other thing I'll add in my final moment, Madam Speaker, is I think as a parliament, we really need to investigate and understand what these events will do to insurance, what people's premiums is going to be in Katherine, in parts of Alice Springs, in parts of regional and remote territory is going to have a significant impact. I know I was talking to people this week, Madam Speaker, their house is on Barrett Drive in Alice Springs, and they've just been told that next year their insurance premium is going to be $25,000 a year to insure their house. That's on top of their mortgage repayments, $25,000 a year. A member for Katherine, I would, hate to think how much that's going to be for people in Katherine now who have already gone through so much. So I think any work we can do as a parliament to better understand the impacts, and if we can do work as a parliament for flood mitigation, can that have a direct impact and reduction on people's home and contents insurance? Because that's where we can actually try and really drive some change, is if we can deliver infrastructure investments that then insurance companies can take into consideration, which can lower people's premiums, because some of these amounts are untenable. People are going to have to sell their houses or are just going to have to go without flood insurance, and that is devastating, and we certainly don't want to see that, Madam Speaker. But again, just acknowledging the real heroes here are the Territorians who stand up, who show up in the time of need, and I certainly welcome any opportunity we can do, Madam Speaker, as an entire parliament to recognise, honour and commemorate the hard work that every Territorian has done in this time of need.
Member for Namatjira.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to provide my contribution about preparing for natural disasters. And one thing is certainly sure, Madam Speaker, is that natural disasters should not be political. When floods, cyclones or fires hit, communities care about safety, access and recovery. Trust me, they don't care about politics. Territorians, of course, as the member for Gwoja has said, and from the member for Katherine, us Territorians understand resilience better than most Australians. We live with some pretty extreme weather, whether you're here at the top end or down in the desert, but we also live with isolation and very long supply chains. And preparing for disasters is not just about speeches or statements. Madam Speaker, what it does really require is a resilient infrastructure, practical planning and real investment. And most importantly, it requires governments willing to make the hard decisions and not just easy announcements. And one of the biggest challenges we face in a territory for disaster preparedness is the territory's actual scale. The Territory Government manages around 22,000 kilometres of roads right across the Territory. And nearly 70% of that network, Madam Speaker, is unsealed. And these roads are not optional infrastructure. They're not just nice to have. These are the lifelines of the Territory and of our communities. And Madam Speaker, when disasters hit, the conditions of those roads determines a number of things. Whether communities can stay connected, can food and fuel reach our towns, and then can emergency services get through should they need to. And we only just have to look at what took place recently in Katherine. Both sides of the highway cut, each side of the community, airstrip underwater. Very, very difficult to get people into or out of that region and to get emergency supplies, if needed, into that community. And unlike most other jurisdictions, our infrastructure must service that vast geographical area, but we only have a very small population base helping fund it. We get criticism that we haven't done the same as other states or other territories, but they have much larger populations, much larger taxation bases than we do. We don't have some of the resources that they have. And sadly, Madam Speaker, that's the Territory reality, and it is the reality that people in the state often struggle to fully grasp. And Madam Speaker, this is exactly why the Chief Minister and I travelled to Canberra just yesterday. And as I said earlier today, from people from interstate hear about the flood damage in the Territory and the widespread impacts, it can sometimes be underestimated. In fact, Madam Speaker, just this wet season, it is estimated that more than 85% of the Northern Territory's road network has been impacted by weather events. And right now, 70 roads across Central Australia alone are under restriction from rainfall just in the last 48 hours. And those are extraordinary figures, Madam Speaker. And just yesterday, with a map of the Territory, the big map, plonked it in front of the Treasurer and plonked it in front of the Minister for Logistics, or the Minister for Infrastructure, Minister King, and actually showed them where the weather events were taking place across the Territory. And I think it opened their eyes, Madam Speaker, because I think they'd heard about the floods. They had a little bit of an idea of what was happening in Alice Springs, and of course they'd heard about Katherine. But when you actually showed them on the map, here's Alice Springs, here's the Western Desert area out in Unamu, Papunya, those areas. Out on the eastern side, the Sandover, the Plenty, up into the Barkly, Murray Downs cut off. Issues up around the Barkly tablelands, and then moving up into the top end and showing them where Daly was, Palumpa, Vic River, and then of course back out onto the eastern side into that Roper River region. To be able to show them physically the widespread impacts, I think certainly gave them a far better understanding of what we are dealing with as a territory right now today. And I know that the member for Gwoja understands these challenges pretty well. And I'm pretty sure that he supports the government's working together to get outcomes on the ground and deliver for the bush. And we know, as I just said, that the damage is not concentrated to one area. It's spread right across the Territory, and it's encompassing all of our regional remote networks. And that is why securing that Commonwealth support is absolutely critical. And that's exactly what I know that I'm doing, and I'm working very hard to continue that forward. But Madam Speaker, this wet season, particularly up here, has been relentless. It's also damaged buildings, homes and businesses. And it damages the livelihoods of Territorians. But the government's priority has been very clear from the start. Keeping people safe is our number one priority. Some communities have had to evacuate due to rising floodwaters and safety concerns, and we will do that work where we have to. Evacuation arrangements were activated in several areas, and these operations require significant coordination between police, emergency services, health services, local council and community leaders. And it has been a very strong example of the Territory emergency response systems working together. At the same time, Madam Speaker, the government has moved quickly to ensure financial support reached affected Territorians. Disaster assistance payments have been activated to help families facing immediate hardship. And as the member for Port Darwin said earlier today, already over 4,500 applications totalling more than $4.09 million have been processed as at close of business yesterday. And that's a mammoth effort to coordinate that and get that money out the door to people that need it. We know that 50 ADF personnel have been mobilised to assist with the clean-up in Katherine. And it's great to see the low security prisoners from Darwin Prison getting out with 4 corrections officers down to Katherine to provide that assistance just like they did in Alice Springs a few weeks back. And is this critical support as communities begin the long recovery and process ahead that is needed? We also, of course, have that new weather system moving across the top end, currently over Queensland. What was the name, Madam Speaker? Cyclone, was it Narelle? Narelle. Thank you, Narelle. Whilst I like the name, I don't particularly want to see you come to the Territory. But this system, in all seriousness, could cause further impacts across the Carpentaria, Katherine and Vic River regions, areas that are already under immense pressure. And of course, a low-pressure system lingering to the west of the NT may influence an extended trough, increasing flooding risks across Tanami, the Upper Vic, and potentially into the Barkly regions. But I'd also like to take this opportunity to talk about our road infrastructure response. And I did mention this during question time today. The main things we've been focused on for our road recovery has been, of course, maintaining that freight access, assessing damage as soon as practical, and beginning repairs as quickly as conditions allow. But what this has meant, Madam Speaker, is we've been getting out there, and as I said earlier, we've been getting onto roads because we know the communities have been cut off, and the minute we can get crews out there with graders to fix the roads, they're out there doing it, only for a week later to have the rain come through and damage those roads again, and that's heartbreaking. But the crews are getting out there, particularly the DLI teams with our contractors, and as I said, if need be, we get out there in helicopters to do these assessments to try and get these critical roads open. They're on the ground and doing the emergency repairs. And of course, the Stewart Highway, our key freight lifeline, has been prioritised to make sure that we keep essential goods moving along with fuel. We have the issues with fuel at the moment, but I'm happy to say that I just seen a tanker leaving the port today, which means it's been in and done its delivery here in Darwin. And the Stewart Highway is open, and I've checked with the fuel retailers, the large retailers in Central Australia, and trucks are coming through from Darwin. And when they couldn't get through due to the floods in Katherine, there were trucks coming up from South Australia. But just today, the Chief Minister has now announced our $100 million flood recovery fund to be managed by Minister Hersey. I can't think of anyone better to oversee that, along with Ken Davies. And Madam Speaker, that fund will focus on rebuilding infrastructure better and stronger, not simply replacing what was lost. And I picked up on the comments from the member for Gwoja, and he said exactly that. It's one thing just to replace the infrastructure, but if we have the ability and government has the will, which we do, we will build it back better so that we're not having to come back again and again to replace that infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, and I go back to my corrections days, everything that happens is a learning experience. And preparing for disasters means learning from them. And disaster preparedness in many ways, Madam Speaker, is about infrastructure resilience. It's about designing our roads to deal with extreme weather, bridges designed for extreme water flow, flood mitigation studies to inform decisions, and community infrastructure and cyclone shelters capable of protecting entire towns. Evacuation centres prepared when needed, and communication centres operational. And that's why infrastructure investment matters. How often have we seen just in the last few weeks, Madam Speaker, I know down the Vic River area, the phone lines were cut, and it was because the phone cable got damaged in a flooded bridge, and it took many days to get in there and do those repairs. Telstra had to wait for the water to go down to then get in and do those repairs. The bridge at Wycliffe Well, how many times have we seen that? It's a great bridge. Goes across Wycliffe Creek. Wycliffe Creek can flood. The bridge is out of the water. It's great. Problem is there's a floodway 2 kilometres from the bridge where the river flows, so you can't get to the bridge. For the member for Barclay, he knows all too well the end of Gilbert Swamp on the southern side. Work done many years ago to strengthen Gilbert Swamp because it always flooded and you always got stuck. So they've done that work. Except at the southern end of Gilbert Swamp, there's a floodway that they didn't do, so the road stays out of the water, the floodway goes under, and you can't get onto the new section of road. These are the simple things that we need to fix, and this is what I'm talking about when we say build back better. Good infrastructure matters, Madam Speaker. Preparing for disasters also requires something else, and that's a strong economy. Because resilient infrastructure is expensive. You can't build 21st century infrastructure on a 20th century economy. And that's why we're focused on rebuilding the economy. And every dollar generated through mining, energy, tourism and agriculture and defence investment is a dollar that can be invested in for infrastructure and resilience. And Madam Speaker, we've done the hard work leading into the 26-27 budget. We made hard decisions to make sure that we were putting the Territory on the right economic footing for the future. And I'll tell you what, Madam Speaker, I stand here today and I'm very glad we've done that work. Because if we hadn't have done that work over the last months, we would be in a difficult position to be able to stand up today and say we are putting $100 million on the table to deal with flood restructure. But on our infrastructure program and delivery into the future, we've committed more than $2 billion to roads and transport infrastructure across our vast road network. These projects strengthen our freight corridors, enable our economic growth and connect communities and improve flood resilience. And Madam Speaker, we're on track to deliver the most kilometres of road sealing in the last decade, and that is saying something, Madam Speaker. But preparing for disasters is not something any government can do alone. It requires collaboration between just our government, the Commonwealth, local councils, industry, land councils, traditional owners and our local communities. And Madam Speaker, this collaboration can be complex but is essential to delivering infrastructure that lasts and infrastructure that can benefit all Territorians. And in my final 30 seconds, I just wanted to make a shout out to all those emergency services volunteers, our police, our nurses, our doctors, everybody on the front line doing that work. But particularly again to the team within DLI that have been out there working for weeks and weeks on end now, looking at our road network, doing those assessments, getting along with our contractors out to those areas that need to be repaired and getting our roads open so our people can get back to communities but also get on with their daily lives. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, here in the Northern Territory, we've experienced more than 14 natural disasters in the last 5 years. That's far more than in the 5 years before that. And just this year, we know we've already faced 4 disasters. Things are getting worse. And we know it's not over yet. Daly River is going to be uninhabitable for months and rains continue to threaten the centre and Katherine. Today we've been warned about another incoming cyclone. This is not normal. Right here, right now, we live in a place of extreme climate. We're constantly lurching from recovery to recovery and we cannot keep pretending these events are rare. The climate crisis is here and the Northern Territory is on the front line. My support and solidarity are with everyone impacted by these events, including people here in this chamber, with particular recognition to the member for Katherine. And I also want to acknowledge all the extraordinary work being done on the ground by people. Madam Speaker, resilience is a word that we hear a lot in this chamber, particularly after the harrowing weeks the Northern Territory is still enduring. But what does resilience mean if it is never followed by proper preparation? Working together to enhance disaster resilience means that every decision about infrastructure, about planning and emergency preparedness must centre the people of our communities, especially those in remote and vulnerable areas. Madam Speaker, these extreme weather events are not a fluke. They are our new reality. The Northern Territory Government's own submission to a Senate inquiry which acknowledged over a decade ago that temperatures are rising and rainfall and cyclone intensity are increasing. That was in 2013. We were warned then 13 years ago and that warning was already old news. So these worsening disasters are hitting our communities and they're hitting our pockets hard. A 2021 estimate put it at $156 million every year. And keep in mind, we have had, as I said, 14 disasters in the 5 years since that study. The costs are going up. But it doesn't have to be like this. For anyone who could possibly need more clarity, even military leaders are worried about what's happening now. The Australian Security Leaders Climate Group, a non-partisan network of former senior military and intelligence leaders, say that climate change is accelerating and it's driven by burning fossil fuels. The UN Secretary-General has warned that humanity has crossed into a new era of global boiling. The CSIRO explains that global heating is made up of irreversible tipping points, and those tipping points are coming faster than we thought. By continuing to burn fossil fuels, we're supercharging our atmosphere. We're turning normal wet seasons into unprecedented catastrophes like these floods, and we're making the Territory unlivable. This is an emergency and the government must respond. Madam Speaker, if we continue down this path, we are not just looking at more floods, we are looking at an existential threat to life in the Northern Territory. This is not hyperbole. According to the Australian Security Leaders Climate Group, the Northern Territory is walking directly into a furnace. These researchers have modelled that if we continue to dig up, export and burn fossil fuels at the rate we have been within the next 40 years, a significant proportion of Northern Australia will be so hot we will experience near unlivable conditions. We're not just talking about this happening in our children's lifetimes anymore, we're talking about our own lifetimes. And that these security experts warn that in 40 years, once Northern Australia reaches these near unlivable conditions, people will be forced to leave. Essential services, infrastructure and the military bases that we rely on for our national security will not be able to be maintained. The fossil fuel industry is not just harming our environment, it is literally destroying the livability of the Northern Territory. And Madam Speaker, you would think that a government faced with the reality of an unlivable territory would do everything in its power to address the cause. Instead, it is handing billions of taxpayer dollars to the gas industry. The CLP has committed a staggering $355 million in subsidies and public money to the fossil fuel industry and promised $4 billion over the next few years. And this doesn't even include the gas that the NT government recently announced that it will purchase from a controversial Beetaloo Basin gas project. Let that sink in. While we debate how to respond to floods that have decimated Katherine and Daly River, floods that are exacerbated by climate change, this government is handing over billions of dollars to the very industry that is supercharging those disasters. We are subsidising our own destruction. The great lie peddled by the gas lobby and parroted by successive Northern Territory governments is that we simply must frack the territory to keep our economy afloat. But, Madam Speaker, after subsidies are paid, the gas industry provides no real financial benefit to the Territory. Let us actually look at the facts on this. The Territory is projected to pay out $355 million in fossil fuel subsidies and other benefits like expensive roads and infrastructure this financial year alone, and will only get back $346 million in total across all mining and gas royalties and taxes. In this chamber, we have heard over and over again the Deputy Chief Minister saying, "I love the gas industry," and "drill, baby, drill." That's because the Deputy Chief Minister wants you to believe that we get $8 million from the Northern Territory gas industry and that money keeps the lights on, runs the hospital and runs the police. Putting aside the fact that $8 million would only run Northern Territory hospitals for 2 days, we don't even get that much from the gas industry. We pay the fossil fuel industry $355 million and we only get $346 million back. We effectively pay $9 million to allow fossil fuel companies to dig up, sell and burn resources that we own as Australians. We're not even giving it away for free, Madam Speaker. We're paying them to take it off us. Now, here's the accounting trick. The government may tell you that these numbers are off. They might say, well, we don't pay $355 million in subsidies. But the truth is the government disguises subsidies to the gas industry by funding roads and infrastructure used exclusively by fossil fuel companies. And together with traditional cold, hard cash subsidies, that makes up $355 million. Madam Speaker, massive corporations like Santos and Origin paid absolutely $0 in gas royalties to the Northern Territory or the federal government for the gas that they took from Northern Territory waters. I want to say that again, $0. So that's still a negative $9 million to our taxpayers and free gas and billion-dollar profits to the gas industry. And what about all the jobs, I hear the government say? Less than 1% of the jobs in the Territory are in mining and gas, and many of those jobs are held by FIFO workers from interstate or overseas. In the future, the mid-range estimate for the Beetaloo Basin is just 90 ongoing jobs. When you divide that up by what we pay the gas industry, each gas job is costing our taxpayers over $350,000. That simply does not pass the pub test. And we keep hearing from the government, trust us, don't worry, the money is coming. But, Madam Speaker, from where? In the best possible scenario, which is widely recognised will not eventuate, fracking in the Beetaloo Basin will generate just $69 million a year, less than 1% of the Northern Territory budget. I've talked in this chamber before about the fact that budgets are about choices, and every $1 million handed to a multinational gas giant is $1 million taken from our under-resourced hospitals, our public schools, and from the disaster recovery funds that Katherine, Beswick, Daly River and other communities across the Territory desperately need right now. And we are getting nothing back. It's a rort, it's not right, and it has to stop. With $355 million every year, or $4 billion over the forward estimates, we could fundamentally transform how prepared this Territory is. We could fully fund emergency services and disaster mitigation multiple times over. We could invest in housing that is built to withstand floods and heat. We could upgrade roads so communities are not cut off every wet season. We could strengthen early warning systems and local response capacity. Madam Speaker, with $4 billion, we could absolutely solve our housing crisis. That is what working together to prepare for disasters actually looks like. Madam Speaker, the CLP is choosing to take hundreds of millions of dollars from our communities every year to subsidise the industries that are causing our disasters. And Madam Speaker, I ask Territorians this because the CLP won't. Are you okay with that? If we truly want to enhance disaster resilience, if we truly want to work together, if we truly want to make sure that our communities are not facing these disasters into the future, the solution does not lie in buying sandbags with one hand and funding the industries that cause the floodwaters to rise with the other. So to my fellow members and my fellow Territorians, it's time to grow up. It's time to put people first. You must immediately stop funding the destruction of the Northern Territory because our home, our lives and our future depend on it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Port Darwin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Absolutely, if we are going to prepare for natural disasters, we need to be working together. And absolutely, have we seen in this country, this beautiful country that we call home, many, many decades of disasters that have evolved over time. The reality is we live in a country that today gives us the best possible, beautiful lifestyle, and tomorrow reminds us that we live in an environment that can turn on a dime, Madam Speaker. And over the last few weeks in the Northern Territory, we have absolutely seen what that looks like. One wet day after another that we celebrated in the initial phases. We had an early cyclone that created some challenges for quite a few people, but we got through it. And then we celebrated the fact that we had the wettest wet that we could remember for quite some time. And then the rains just kept coming and coming and coming. And we are absolutely in a situation that we have not faced before, where we literally have flooding from the top of the Territory to the bottom of the Territory and more rain on the way. And it's created havoc and crisis and distress. And if we're going to be prepared for that in the future, we must work together because that is the only way you can prepare for disaster. Interested to hear the member for Johnston blame the current situation on the gas industry. It's a little bit of a stretch, and her extrapolation of what the gas industry is or isn't doing indicates perhaps not enough information is flowing through, and I'd be very happy to spend some time giving the member for Johnston some information around just what those opportunities will provide for the Territory. So you're right, member for Johnston, royalties don't give you much, but what the opportunity of that resource will give our Territory, our country, our region is absolutely transformational. It will create the opportunity to build industry, to build jobs, to create networks of new hospitals and schools and grow our population and tell people that this is the place they want to live. This is the place they want to be. Because the one thing that will give us that we've not really had and we've all experienced from time to time, I know in my 30-odd years in the Territory I've had more than my fair share of blackouts, is energy security that will keep the lights on and will supply security for the development of our territory well into the future. You're right about us not getting much from the Santoses of the world because that's offshore gas. And the difference between what is happening in the Beetaloo Basin today compared to what's been happening across the country in other gas exploration and gas production from the Territory's point of view is it's onshore gas, and it's gas that we have the opportunity to maximise the flow from, to attract business, to attract industry, industries that will help us get to net zero, industries that will help us develop opportunities for our children and our grandchildren, opportunities to grow whole new towns and centres, opportunities that, as the member for Berkeley likes to say, will see the land of opportunity, which is the Berkeley region, going to the heart of Australia, which is Alice Springs, and Katherine, which is the centre of the universe, according to the member for Katherine, opportunities that will be unsurpassed and will set us up for generations to come. So I really hope that the member for Johnston does take the opportunity to reach out. We'll have a coffee sometime. I'd be happy to sit down with you and have a chat about what these opportunities are for us in the gas industry. As we actually embrace those opportunities, we will see development for our Aboriginal communities. We'll see building of new infrastructure. We'll see funding of roads that we need desperately, particularly in the current situation. Infrastructure that will enable us to actually invest back into our hospitals and our healthcare and our education system, and perhaps give us the opportunity to look beyond politics and work together so that we don't have to face the current situation that we're facing at the moment again in the future. I've lived through more than my fair share of natural disasters, Madam Speaker. As a kid growing up, I got flooded out on a regular basis and have vivid memories as a child of having all of my bedroom furniture on 44-gallon drums. And for one season, one winter, they pretty well stayed there for the whole 3 months of winter, Madam Speaker, because every time we thought it would be okay to put those furniture back on the floor where it belonged, the creek would rise again and we'd be headed out and isolated from our home as we waited for the waters to recede. My dad lived through the 1955 Maitland flood, which tore through the Hunter Valley, taking lives, destroying homes, unprecedented at that time. I lived through the Newcastle earthquake, a natural disaster of proportions not seen before in our country. I almost lost my husband at the time and my son as they exited a building, only to have the awning of that building crash down behind them. So natural disasters are things that we do need to mitigate against, and we do need to work to prevent. But in order to do that, we need the resources to be able to do that. We need to be able to fund the projects and have control over our own destiny. I think that what happens post a natural disaster, and I certainly saw it in Newcastle after the earthquake, was that for a very long time there is a shell shock where it's really impossible to understand where you go, how do you fix it, where do you move on. And sometimes that shock just pushes the reality of what happened into the background so that people get up and just go, well, you know what, it's never going to happen again. It's okay. We don't need to worry about it too much because it was a one-off thing. But we know in this country that's not true. There are bushfires, there are floods, there are earthquakes. We have quite a few shakes in the Northern Territory as well. So what we need to make sure we do from this episode and what's happened at this particular moment in our history is let's not just get up when the rain stops and the waters recede and not do things differently. Let's make sure that we approach things differently. Let's make sure that we can work together to get a resolution so that we don't see the population of Daly River having to be evacuated time and time again. Let's make their homes secure and safe. Let's find a better way to resolve it. Let's look for the opportunities to improve the infrastructure so that we don't lose contact with the rest of the world. And to achieve that, we will have to work together. And we've seen evidence of that, Mr Deputy Speaker, over the past couple of weeks, where we've seen people come together in the most extraordinary of circumstances. We've seen people working for government step up time and time again to help their fellow Territorians. We've seen people in business put aside their own concerns about their family homes and their businesses to help their neighbours. We've seen total strangers come to the Territory to help everybody that is affected by these floods without even a second thought. The organisations like Red Cross, St Vincent de Paul, Salvation Army, all standing up to be there for the people who've been displaced and impacted by this terrible situation. And I know I spoke about it earlier today, Mr Deputy Speaker, but I really do want to give a big shout out to the effort that's been made and the work that's been done by the Department of Children and Families, who have been front and centre of the welfare response. They have been there with those people who have been displaced. They have worked over the last couple of weeks across 8 evacuation centres, which fortunately now is down to 5 as we gradually start to get people back into their homes. In Katherine, it was fantastic news to hear in the last 24 hours that the last person in the evacuation centre had moved out of the evacuation centre, and people are starting that recovery process in Katherine. It's a long road, but the fact that you're on that road is such an improvement on not knowing where you're headed tomorrow or what the next day will bring. We've got people who are now able to access relief funding immediately through an online system that had been talked about on and off for the last 5 or 6 years. But when the immediate crisis passed, it had kind of fallen off into the background, and nobody thought, you know how we said it would be really great if we could do online applications and process payments while we were dealing with that emergency last week? Nobody thought, well, why don't we deal with it now when we haven't got an emergency that we're faced with, so that the next time this happens, because in the world that we live in, it's inevitable that there will be a next time. Why don't we do it now? Then when the next time happens, we'll be ready to go. But sadly, that didn't happen. But credit to the team at the Department of Children and Families and the Department of Corporate and Digital Development. I think I got that right, DCDD. They went, you know what, we need to do it right now. We can do it right now and we can fix it. And within less than a week, Mr Deputy Speaker, that's exactly what they did. And today it went live that you can apply for your immediate relief payment online. And if you are remote, we will get the money to you through an electronic payment, which has never happened before. So disaster brings revolution. Disaster brings opportunity in the wake of the horrendous events that people face. And we can learn from that right now, right here in this period of time, so that when we face the next inevitable disaster, we'll be ready, we'll be prepared. It won't be the thing that we forgot to do because we're suddenly very relieved around the fact that the cyclone had passed, or the bushfire didn't engulf our town, or the flood didn't rise as high as we anticipated it would. For those of you who've been in the Territory a long time, and I think most of the people in the chamber have, you'll remember the 1998 Katherine flood and thought, it's never going to happen again. And then in 2007, it almost happened that bad again, but not quite as bad. And then in 2015, we had to move the Daly River mob into town. And then just a few short weeks ago, the same thing happened, and we thought it was okay, and everyone went home, and a very short time later, here we are back again. So we must work together. We must be a team if we are going to prepare for this in the future. We have to take the fight to Canberra. We have to get them to back us in. We have to get them to make sure that our national highways are as robust and as strong as they can be. We want to know that our rail line is going to be secure. We need to know that no matter what, our food security is there. And mentioning food security, Mr Deputy Speaker, I need to give a shout out to the Department of Trade, Business and Asian Relations as well, who have been working overtime to make sure that they get supplies to our stores and our communities that are isolated, and who have been working really hard to make sure that fuel gets to those isolated communities as well. So a big shout out to the volunteers, all of the public sector people who've been pitching in to help with this, and to everybody in this chamber who has vouched and supported their communities, because this is where the Territory comes to the fore. This is who we are. This is what we do. When things go bad, when things go south, we forget the politics, we stand together and we support each other and we get each other back on track. So absolutely, I think this MPI is one that we should be striving for. Absolutely, we should be striving to make sure that we work together to resolve the potential for what's been happening in our Territory over the last 3 to 4 weeks doesn't happen in this way again. That next time we're faced with this type of situation, when we hear about Cyclone Narelle coming our way, we'll go, that's okay, we got this, we've got it covered, we know everybody is going to be safe, we know everyone is going to be secure, and we absolutely know that we can all stand together to achieve that goal. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Port Down. Member for Arafura.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today's MPI working together to better prepare for natural disasters. Territorians are very resilient people across the top end, down Katherine, down Jinson, Daly River. But we've had one of the worst flooding events in decades. Hundreds of millimetres of rain have fallen in the past couple of weeks. In Katherine, the river peaked at 19.2 metres, the highest level since 1998. And in 1998, I went down to Katherine 2 weeks after the floods to play a game of footy down there. Wasn't the best idea, because all the grass were, all the mud was on the oval. The Daly River at Uibo experienced record flooding, with the water well above major flood threshold and expected to stay that way for the rest of the week. Along with the people of Pulumpa, who say that they've never had a flood since the community was developed. Around 60 people are displaced from Jinson. Around 6 people were trapped by floodwaters in Jinson and had to be transported to Mataranka. Many more properties were affected as well. The Dheran River, Bachelor, some reports of people couldn't get over the Komali Creek. Member for Blaine, there's a couple of hours there when people couldn't cross the river there. A couple of family members still living down there. My electorate of Arafura, past Jabiru, is flooded for 6 months of the year, every year. So I kept a close eye on Gunbalanya and kept on ringing the services out there. But thankfully, we have a good plain country system, sort of, and the ocean close by, so everything flushes out. But I remember when I worked for the Northern Land Council, every wet season, and then in April and May, I used to drive up to check the roads, to help with the police to do the roads report. And because there are like 14 to 15 different creek crossings between Jabiru and Manangrida, we didn't know what we'd expect. So every crossing we'd come across, we'd make sure we checked the depth and everything. And some of them were ponds, were new ecosystem, new like fishing holes and stuff. And we'd come across it, and that takes weeks and weeks to get patched up for the road to be good again for the dry season. So this is the type of thing that we face in the remote areas. We've got to check the roads every year, patch it up, because it's not bitumized. That needs to happen with all the infrastructure as well. Everything needs to be checked every year and bolstered. We've got Telstra communication centres, you've got Telstra towers that need to be checked, and you've got roads that need to be looked at. Gamba grass need to be, from the ranger program, need to be cut down. A couple of years ago, the member for Barclay had a big bushfire in his region. So it's a holistic effort. You've got to look at all parts of the natural disaster sort of cycle, dry season, wet season, and just to make Territory a safer place. We've got another cyclone coming. Hopefully it takes a different route, but I thank the Chief Minister and the Treasurer for going down and advocating on behalf of Territorians, and we are definitely on board and wanting to travel down and advocate with Uibo when it comes. It's a huge effort. Ultimately, we just want to see the CLB government work with the federal government, and if you guys need us, we'll come along as well and advocate on behalf of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Arafura. Member for Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As we're all well aware, large areas of the Territory have recently been impacted by intense rainfall and widespread flooding. These conditions have created significant challenges for communities across the region and placed substantial pressure on our essential services, including our health system. For many Territorians, the impacts have been immediate and deeply felt through disrupted services, damaged infrastructure, and the uncertainty that often accompanies events of this scale. Despite these challenges, the response from our frontline workers and the strength shown by our communities has been absolutely remarkable. The flooding meant that Katherine Hospital had to be evacuated, with patients transferred to Darwin to ensure their care could continue safely. Last week I had the opportunity to update the Chamber on this incredible amount of work undertaken by our dedicated healthcare staff who coordinated and delivered the evacuation. Since then, a major focus has been on restoring hospital services for the Katherine community. Hospitals are central to the wellbeing of communities, providing not only the critical medical services, but also reassurance that care will be available when it's needed most. I'm pleased to advise, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the Katherine Hospital reopened on Sunday, representing an important milestone in the community's recovery from the recent flooding. Extensive safety checks and inspections were undertaken to ensure the facility could safely reopen through a staged and carefully managed approach. Thank you to the dedication of the NT Health staff and the Katherine Hospital team. Essential services are once again being restored for the community. The emergency department is now operating from the hospital again, and the temporary facility at the St John headquarters has now closed. The Jack Rooney General Medicine Ward has reopened with limited bed capacity as services gradually expand. Operating theatres are available for emergency procedures, and the medical day stay unit has recommenced services with patients being contacted directly regarding their treatments. Outpatient appointments and elective procedures affected by the flooding will also be rescheduled in coming weeks. Patients evacuated to the Royal Darwin Hospital will begin returning to Katherine where it is clinically appropriate. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I do want to thank all of the Katherine Health staff for their incredible commitment. Some of those staff also travelled to Darwin to support those patients that were evacuated from Katherine to Darwin. But also many of the staff have been supporting the emergency response tirelessly, even while facing flood impacts in their own homes. Their dedication to caring for Territorians during this challenging period deserves our deepest appreciation. But also, I do want to thank Trent from Rod and Rifle Tackle World in Katherine for helping share the message that the Katherine Hospital is open again, and those that have been following social media would have seen Trent's ride-through, and if you followed his ride through the Katherine Hospital, you would have seen and heard about all the incredible work that's been going on there at the Katherine Hospital, and I did see many other updates from Trent as well, which gave some really good examples of everybody pulling together during those most difficult times. I extend my sincere gratitude to the staff, families and community members who stepped up during the emergency response. The dedication and professionalism shown throughout this event demonstrates the strength of all of our Territory communities. It is through these collective efforts that communities are supported, protected and able to recover. As we know, extreme weather events do not only challenge our health system, they also place significant pressure on the infrastructure that communities rely on every single day, including power, water and of course sewerage. Power and Water had 54 people, including 20 specialists, doing the urgent emergency repairs on the pumps at the Darwin River Dam last week. They had to build the road so trucks could get through to even start the repairs. Over the weekend, Power and Water advised that the 4 pumps were repaired and the pump station has been returned to the overhead power supply network. Repair works will continue to the treatment and pump station buildings with a focus on flood mitigation works as wet weather continues. Short-term measures include additional sandbagging to protect recent repair works, while longer-term mitigation will include the construction of an additional levee wall to protect pump station infrastructure during severe weather events. In Katherine, hard-working crews had restored power to more than 2,800 properties. Crews have been working on fixing sewer issues. These works are not only affecting sewer services to customers, however, repairs are expected to take quite some time. Right across all affected communities, our essential workers are working extremely hard to ensure services are restored as soon as possible and when safe to do so. On some of the remote communities, Mr Deputy Speaker, Beswick has moved to the recovery phase with services restored. In Palumpa, assessment of infrastructure has confirmed that the power station remained dry. Palumpa, as we know, is fully evacuated with residents staying at the Marara Indoor Stadium. And I will say, Mr Deputy Speaker, that I did visit the Marara Indoor Stadium to meet with families from the Palumpa community. Those families are being supported by volunteers from Salvation Army and the Australian Red Cross. And while I was there, it was terrific to see activities underway and some of the organisations that are present assisting and supporting families and young people. It was great to see Hoops for Health out there engaging with young people, but also Orange Sky Australia. They were on site helping residents with laundry needs. So again, a great example of everybody coming together during these difficult times. But just going out to Marara, just seeing the Northern Territory government staff, including interpreters from the AIS, which are part of one of my departments, the Department of Housing, Local Government and Community Development. They're doing some incredible work. They're supporting the evacuees from Palumpa. In Daly River, where the river has peaked and I believe may be slowly receding, assessment of infrastructure will commence once access is safe and available into that community. We have seen the vision of the devastation with every building in that community inundated with water, right up to the roof lines, and some of those pictures that I've seen through the media and on social media show that really, in many cases, it's just really the roof that's you can see through those photos. Water and sewage systems have been isolated and not operational. The power station continues to supply some customers on Wooliana Road, but also on the weekend, Mr Deputy Speaker, also went out to the Foskey Pavilion, and it was great to see you in your capacity as the member for Karama, but also as the obviously the Deputy Minister for Housing as well. It was great to see you there, but talking to different families out at the Foskey Pavilion. Again, they're being supported by the Salvation Army, the Australian Red Cross, and it was great to see Tajinder Singh out there also supporting families and providing some meals to those families, meals and the fruit juices and all of those things, and really showing the support and the charity work that he does in his community, but getting out to the Foskey Pavilion and providing that support as well. And I know, Mr Deputy Speaker, we had the opportunity to talk to Northern Territory Government staff again, seeing interpreters from the Department of Housing, Local Government and Community Development. There was also police there, Aboriginal community police officers and Aboriginal liaison officers there from the Northern Territory Police who are on site and again working directly with those families and assisting and supporting them with inquiries and providing whatever support they can, because we know these are difficult times for all of those families, and seeing firsthand the families from Palumpa, Daly River, it was good to get out there and just let them know that we are here to support them. Mr Deputy Speaker, in Jiltmenken, power and water and sewer systems are operational. Water quality testing is underway. The boil water alert remains in place. In my electorate, Murray Downs, I note recovery work is underway where flooding caused significant damage to homes and community infrastructure. Water and wastewater services are fully restored at Murray Downs. Power is restored to all but 2 properties, which are awaiting certificates of compliance. Housing assessment teams have been actively on the ground, working diligently to identify properties impacted by the recent events, wherever it is safe and feasible to do so. These efforts are critical to understanding the full extent of housing damage and ensuring the right support is delivered to those affected. Additional teams will be deployed to communities more recently impacted so that all affected households can be assessed and further assistance required. The government remains committed to supporting residents through the recovery process and restoring safe, secure housing as a priority. As I said, damage assessments are ongoing, and once it is safe to access properties, repairs will be prioritised so tenants can return home as soon as possible. As I said in question time, we are working through an emergency rent pause for flood-affected public housing tenants. This is to make sure tenants are supported for periods where they cannot safely access or live in their home because of flood events. Our government remains focused on supporting displaced tenants and residents, assessing damage as quickly as possible and helping affected public housing tenants. While the response is underway, we continue to survey and assess conditions for entry to communities, followed by scoping of properties for safety. Our government is committed to supporting Territorians through the days and weeks ahead. As Territorians, we are no strangers to extreme weather events. They are part of the reality of living in the Territory, and they test not only our infrastructure, but our communities as well. It is for this reason that resilience and preparedness are built into our systems with strong planning and backup arrangements in place to support continuity of services. Mr Deputy Speaker, these measures ensure that even in the most challenging circumstances, essential services can continue to operate and communities can be supported. All government staff from not only my agencies and health, housing and essential services, but all agencies including emergency services, police, volunteers, all of the government departments, Salvation Army, Red Cross, all have shown amazing Territory spirit and resilience in the face of these unprecedented weather events. As Minister for Health, Essential Services and Minister for Housing, Local Government and Community Development, I want to reassure everybody that I'm committed to ensuring that these systems remain strong, effective and ready to respond whenever they are called upon. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr Deputy Speaker, and in closing, again, thank you to everybody involved. For the residents that have been affected by floods, we are here to support you. We're listening and we'll be providing the ongoing services until you are able to get back to your home. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Berkeley. Member for Daly.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And firstly, I would like to also acknowledge the MPI that we're all speaking on this evening about working together to better prepare for natural disasters. And Mr Deputy Speaker, I do want to take this time to firstly thank our emergency services, our police, our volunteers, our Aboriginal corporations, our local governments across all the regions that have been impacted by the floods across the top end of the territory and now down into Central Australia, but in particular in my electorate of Daly, which has been severely impacted by these floods, from Daly River to Darwin River to Palumpa to Douglas Daly, and a couple of the homelands that have been impacted due to food security issues down there. But I know the emergency services, the police, the volunteers that have been out on the ground helping have done an amazing job. I've spoken to many people that have been on the ground doing that work to ensure the safety of all people, no matter where they're from, to get them to safety. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's been, as the member for Katherine has been down in Katherine dealing with the floods, it's heartbreaking to see what's going down in our regions. I spoke about this last week in the chamber. Many of my good friends for over a decade now from Daly River have literally lost everything. I'm speaking to them on a daily basis, from phone calls at night time, from phone calls in the morning, from phone calls during the day, and the uncertainty is real. The uncertainty of not knowing when to go home is something I don't wish upon anyone. And we are getting to a stage where people just want to have a plan. They want to have a plan to know what are the next steps. I think they know they're not getting home anytime soon. But knowing, will there be supported accommodation? Because what I can say right now, while Foskey's Pavilion is set up as good as it can be, and the work the public service are doing well down there, it cannot be a long-term solution over the next few months. It is not right, it is not fair that people may have to sleep there for months in a shelter amongst other families, children running around, where you have over 100 people just at the Foskey's Pavilion alone. I don't think it is right. And I know the member for Barclay's been out there. I believe the Chief Minister and the member for Port Darwin have been out there. I've had a couple of phone calls about that visit already from locals out there. I know yourself, Mr Deputy Speaker, have been there. But when you go there, just put yourself in people's shoes and understand, how would you feel if you were there knowing you had to stay there for a few months? So we do need to transition now, and I'll support you. I supported the member. I said it publicly on my Facebook page. I supported the Treasurer and the Chief Minister going down to Canberra to meet with the Treasurer. I've said it in my own statement, calling on Christy McBain to come up here from the federal government, because this is about the people and what is next and how we get people home. I will pick up on some of the comments, though, from the member for Port Darwin. We know we can't politicise this issue. We need to work together, and I'm getting the sense that that's what the government want to do. I have reached out many times. I still haven't had a phone call. I still haven't received responses to those emails, those concerns from the constituents. I am willing to work with the government to pass on those concerns from my constituents. That is the role of the local member, and we should not be worrying about what political party we sit on, because it's about the people at the end of the day. But we still have a role in opposition to hold governments to account. That is the role of opposition. That is not politicising issues. If constituents are coming in with genuine concerns and we're passing them on to the government, that is not politicising issues. That is passing on the concerns of the constituents. And I think a good government would take on those concerns and be held accountable to ensure that those processes are better, are done better, because at the end of the day, it's about the people. It's not about me, it's not about you. It's about how we can ensure that we respond to natural disasters better, because what we saw in Daly River was quite concerning, that there were still 70 to 80 people left behind having to wade through water to get on a boat and then cross over to Wooliana Road on a small boat. And I don't think anyone should have to wade through water not knowing if there's crocodiles through that water. I've spoken to teachers who had to do that, who had to wade through that water. I've spoken to community members that have had to wade through that water. We need to understand how we can better tighten up those systems, tighten up those response times to ensure that everyone feels safe. I heard the member for Namatjira talk about our emergency services are stretched. Well, there is an issue there where how do we get the ADF in earlier? How do we get the ADF in earlier to help assist? So we've got more boots on the ground, because at the end of the day, it's about people's safety. And I question why the ADF weren't called in earlier when we knew there was going to be this widespread flooding event. We saw it in Katherine. We know it comes down the river to Daly. It impacts the Daly River. We need to understand why the ADF weren't called in better. And look, if it's an issue that's a process issue for the federal government, okay, we can deal with that. We need to work through how we actually activate more support for the territory if that's the actual issue. And I can hear the member for Namatjira mumbling under his breath over there, but he should be looking at practical solutions to ensure that it's about the safety of Territorians that come first. And that is what we're all asking for here, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I am still looking forward to the government reaching out to me to provide those updates, and I can give my concerns back to them. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Daly. And the time for this important MPI has now expired. Minister.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I move that the Assembly do now adjourn.
The question is that the Assembly adjourn. Are there any speakers? Member for Sanderson.
Last week, I had the opportunity to talk about one of the schools in my electorate, Sanderson High School. I spoke about its exciting transition from a middle school and some of the key leaders at that school. Tonight, I would like also to highlight one of the most exciting recent developments at the school, the refurbishment of a former classroom into a fully equipped hair salon training studio. This purpose-built facility now supports Year 10 students undertaking their Certificate 2 in Hair Salon Assistant VET course. The new studio provides a professional, industry-standard learning environment where students can develop hands-on skills, build confidence, and gain authentic workplace experience. Currently, 13 students are enrolled and progressing through this course. By semester 2, students are expected to reach a suitable competency level to begin welcoming paying customers into the studio for treatments. This will be a tremendous milestone, allowing students to gain real-world experience while also serving members of local community. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these developments demonstrate what is possible when we invest in our schools, listen to our communities, and create pathways that recognize that success looks different for every student. The transition of Sanderson Middle School into a comprehensive high school, the delivery of the Northern Territory Certificate of Education and Training, the development of Specialist Trade and Technical College, and the establishment of modern vet facilities like the new hair salon studio, all point to a very bright future for students in Sanderson. I commend Rob McIntosh, the leadership team, staff, students, and families for embracing this exciting new chapter. I look forward to the day in the not too distant future when we celebrate the first cohort of Year 12 graduates from Sanderson High School, young Territorians who will leave their school confident, capable, and ready to contribute to the future of our territory. I also want to acknowledge and congratulate a number of outstanding young leaders from schools across the Sanderson electorate who have recently been recognized by their school communities. On Friday, 6 March, Woolagi Primary School held a special leadership assembly where student leaders proudly received their leadership badges. These badges represent not only achievement, but also the responsibility to lead by example, support their peers, and contribute positively to their school. I congratulate the Wulagi Primary School captains, Natalie Torch, Christian Sperti, Finlay Manley, and Francesca De La Cruz. I also acknowledge the house captains who will help foster teamwork and school spirit throughout the year. For Pelican House, Quaden Holtz and Lucas Cole. For Jebru House, Tegan Pollack and Aidan Lindsay. And for Brolga House, Mason Whitney and Jace Hubert. It was particularly heartening to see Christian Sperti continue to be recognized in their leadership capacity. I had the privilege of presenting Christian with the Anula Citizenship Award at last year's presentation assembly, and it is wonderful to see her leadership journey continue. I would also like to recognize the newly announced student leaders at Anula Primary School. At the end of 2025, the school announced their school captains, Sahara Walsh and Lauren Kim, with vice captains Isabel Summert and Hadley Abbott. Over the past few weeks, students have been submitting nominations for the Student Representative Council and delivering strong house captain speeches. Each class has also nominated a student leader to join the Anula student leadership team. These students will collaborate on student-led events and assemblies while modeling the Anula school values of responsibility, collaboration, respect, honesty, and doing your best. They will also contribute to the Northern Territory Learning Commission team for Anula School, ensuring student voices are part of shaping positive change within the school. I congratulate the following students who have been selected: Peyton Walsh, Jackson Walters, Ruby Tragaskis, Sarah Hawkins, Asarius Tariku, Esra Ambrose, Saskia Wilson, Edith Green, Imogen Camara, and Jack Dinelt. I wish all of these young leaders every success as they step into their leadership roles this year. Later this month, on Friday, 27 March, I will also have the pleasure of visiting Marara Christian College to meet with their senior school captains and prefects to discuss the year ahead and what leadership means to them, both now and into their future. I acknowledge their student leadership team, primary captains Mia Mustin and Benedict Ukebu, primary vice captains Angela Ko and Justice Veru, senior captains Demelsa Gaikopoulos and Cahill Prosser, senior vice captains Marilyn Guruvivi and Matilda Novinets, and secondary prefects Raquel Kentish, Cassia Lynn, Matthew Riley, Josiah Gonzalez, Connor Luke Harper, Justina Thompson, Caleb Francis, Chloe Cocker, Eva Andrio, and Manu Sukani. One of the first official duties these students will undertake is assisting with the organization of the school's annual Anzac Day service, an important event that brings the school community together to reflect on the service and sacrifice of Australians. I am very much looking forward to attending this event. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I congratulate all of these students and thank the principals, teachers, and families who support them in their leadership journeys. These young Territorians are wonderful representatives of our community, and I wish them every success for the year ahead. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.